Now, let's get another perspective on the state of this presidential contest and the importance of next week's first presidential debate. Jim Fallows, National Affairs Editor at the Atlantic Monthly and a former speechwriter to President Jimmy Carter. Jim Fallows, welcome back to Planet America.
Nice to talk with you, John. Thanks.
We've got the first presidential debate coming up next week in Denver, Colorado. How important is this going to be?
It is important because it's really the last chance that the Romney campaign has to put a new face on his whole candidacy. The previous chance was the convention, and that didn't go so well. I don't know how well the Clint Eastwood moment was publicized here in Australia.
We gave it a good run.
It was, well, deservedly so. And so almost all the fundamentals seem to be going against Mr. Romney right now. So this seems to be his last clean shot at saying, okay, don't pay attention to these last few months. Listen to me now.
He's been running for the presidency for the best part of 6 years now.
Best or worst, but
yeah. and it's now with 6 weeks to go that he's trying to introduce himself to the American people. Does that suggest there is a fundamental problem?
I think there are so many indications of a fundamental problem. One of the things that struck me from the Republican convention is how many of the speeches were essentially, oh yeah, I'm for this Romney guy, but look at me for 2016. That was a theme of Chris Christie and Marco Rubio and many of the others. The idea that through the primaries, Mitt Romney was essentially everybody's second choice, and there was a parade of other people as alternatives to him, indicates some of the problems. Also, just in terms of basic athleticism of politics, he really is a bad athlete as a politician. Almost everything he does is suggest either when he does it right, it's laborious, and when he doesn't do it right, it makes trouble for him. So what he is actually best at in the whole arsenal of campaigning is debating. So we may have a chance to see him at his best in this next run.
The first debate is about domestic policy. The last couple of weeks, though, has been unusually perhaps taken up to a large extent by foreign policy. A lot of talk about what's been happening in the Middle East and elsewhere. Is that going to continue?
Well, certainly the Romney campaign has its main opening in foreign policy is to say this whole opening to the Arab world that President Obama placed so much stress on over the last couple of years, his Middle Eastern and Iranian approach, maybe they are all going to hell, so to speak, and so that there is an opening there. Interestingly, Mr. Romney handicapped himself in that his initial response to some of the rioting in Libya, where the American ambassador and several others were murdered by a mob, put him at such a disadvantage by politicizing the event that it's taken him time to recover and use this as the sort of attack field on the president that he might otherwise do.
Your old boss, Jimmy Carter, went into the one debate with Ronald Reagan in 1980, ahead still in some polls, but it was seen as decisive. Could these debates be decisive? Could Mitt Romney pull a Ronald Reagan at the last minute?
Certainly anything is possible, and if you've seen as many elections as I sadly have, you know that you can't really count on anything until the votes are counted, and then even after that, as we saw in the 2000 campaign. The Romney campaign all the way along has been using 1980 as its example, because then you had a vulnerable incumbent in the form of Jimmy Carter and a challenger whose argument was essentially, he tried his best, he's failing, so give me a chance. And then things really swung when there was the first debate, and people could say, okay, Carter's doing poorly, we feel comfortable with Reagan. So the Romney campaign has been hoping that these debates would have the same effect, that anybody who was unhappy with the general trend of the economy or other things about Obama could say, all right, I've seen this man Romney, he looks okay to me, so that's what they're hoping will happen.
There are lots and lots of polls around at the moment, and it seems that there has been a shift back towards President Obama in the last 2 or 3 weeks since the convention, an average lead around 4% this week. Is that enough to say, as some Democrats are, you know what, this is over? There's no way we can lose this now.
I would never say this is over. I'd never say there's no way, because unexpected things always happen. You would have to say, however, as I've been saying for the last year, that President Obama has a lot better hand to play than Governor Romney does. And it's not simply that Governor Romney has never been ahead of President Obama in all the polls, nor that as the election gets closer, the lead for Obama seems to be increasing, and that every single day reduces the playing field for Romney. It's even more than that, the fact that in the decisive swing states, in this terrible electoral college system we have, that unless Governor Romney wins Ohio and Florida, he really cannot win. And President Obama seems to have a substantial and growing lead, especially in Ohio. So I'm sure that is very much on the mind of both camps right now.
And yet Governor Romney has a substantial, possibly 2-to-1 money advantage heading into the final month and a half. If he spends that money wisely in Ohio, in Florida, in Virginia, and maybe there's a couple of bad jobs figures out in the middle of all that, could we still be seeing President Romney?
Again, anything could happen, so anybody is foolish to predict who will win this election until it occurs. Interesting point to me, number one, money has less influence in incumbent re-election campaigns than most others because people already know President Obama. For better or worse, people have an opinion about this guy. You can run all the negative, positive ads you want. Everybody has the last 4 years of experience to judge by. Point number two, I think most people in the Democratic Party, what they're really worried about is voter suppression efforts of turnout issues. There's been a huge effort by Republicans in a lot of these swing states to tighten the eligibility laws, so a lot of constituencies they expect to be Democratic will have a harder time voting. So if the election is to go Romney's way, and there's not some extraneous bolt from the blue that explains that, I think it would be turnout issues and indeed voter suppression issues that probably would make the difference.
Jim Fallows, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you, John.